The sky above New Haven burned orange and red, not from sunrise, but from fire that had been raging for 7 endless days. The colonists had once called this place a sanctuary, a jewel among the silver trees and crystal caves of Kepler 44, 2b now. It was little more than ash and broken stone. Administrator Thexani pressed his forehands against the cold glass of the control tower and watched as another piece of his world was torn apart. The Korak ships hung in the heavens like vultures. With wings of iron, their shadows crawling across the land, every few hours they would strike another blow. One more building reduced to rubble. Yesterday, it was the water treatment plant, the day before, that the main power station, today, their guns lingered above the last orbital defense platform, as if savoring the kill. Thexani closed his eyes as the station exploded into a rain of molten shards. The final shield of his people gone. He was supposed to protect them, 20,000 Zalani miners. Farmers, children, and elders who had trusted his promises of peace. They were no warriors, no soldiers. Their city had been built for beauty, not war. And now all that beauty was crumbling before his eyes. Administrator called Vexlar from across the chamber. The chief engineer looked pale, his voice hoarse from days without sleep. The power grid is failing. We have 6 hours at most before the underground shelters lose air. 6 hours until life itself is choked away. Thexani nodded slowly. 6 hours was all that remained. His fingers trembled as he opened the colony-wide channel. This is New Haven Colony. We are under attack by Korak raiders. 20,000 civilians require evacuation. Immediate assistance requested. Please someone help us. His words echoed hollow in the silence. He had sent the same cry hundreds of times before, and always the answer was silence. The outer rim was too far. No government would risk warships for a mining outpost. No corporation would sacrifice profit for lives beyond counting. But still he tried, because what else could he do? But begged the stars beyond the crystal walls, Zalani families hurried toward the underground tunnels. Their young carried close in soft pouches, the old leaning on carved staffs. Their movements calm despite the terror pressing on them. Dignity was their way. Even at the edge of death, they would not scream. Thexani watched them vanish into the earth and wondered if he had led them into a tomb. Above the sky thundered again. Another blast. Another fire. The Korak were taking their time playing with their prey deep in the tunnels. Elder Keeper Nixara raised her voice in song. The ancient melodies of the caves resonated through crystal walls, calming frightened children. She sang of silver light guiding their souls home and of ancestors who had once carved these same caverns. But among the young, not all were ready for peace. Zaxley, newly molted, still flush with the restless energy of youth, crept through maintenance passages toward the power station, while others prepared for death. She prepared for defiance if she could reroute energy from life support to the beacon. Perhaps their call for help might reach farther. Perhaps someone might hear them, even if it cost her own breath. She was willing to give it. On the bridge of the flagship, Bloody Fang War Captain Sethak grew restless. He was a reptile of scarred scales and pitiless eyes. The Zalani had ceased resisting their defense platforms, shattered their patrol craft. Nothing but debris. He flicked his tongue in contempt. Begin the final assault. He ordered half their population alive for the markets. The rest slaughtered. The Korak did not just conquer, they devoured worlds, leaving only ruin as warning. To others, transport ships dropped from orbit like falling daggers, each carrying squads of warriors with plasma rifles and chains. Thexani saw them descend and felt his heart sink, but still he activated the final beacon. His last act as leader, this is Administrator Thexani. The Korak fleet has begun its final attack. We have no defenses left. 20,000 souls will soon be killed or enslaved. We lived in peace, we harmed no one. We only sought a better life. Please remember us. Remember that. We tried to be good. His voice faltered, tears falling silently, while above him the Korak descended like a storm. Zaxili finished her desperate work alarms, blared as life support collapsed, the air thinning in the shelters, but the beacon now roared, with 3 times its strength, screaming into the void farther than it ever had, before she fell, gasping, clutching the cold stone, whispering a final plea to whatever powers might exist. Please someone help use. In the crowded depths, the tunnels shook. Under sonic bombardment, dust and crystal fragments raining from the ceiling, the colonists clutched each other in the dark, their breath already thin. Children cried softly until Elder Nixara hushed them again, her words painting courage where none should exist. She told stories of heroes who had stood against hopeless odds. The children listened, their eyes wide, but one asked, "Where are our heroes now? Why does no one come?" The elder smiled. Though her heart was breaking, sometimes heroes are those who refuse to give up hope when all seems lost. She said sometimes heroes are strangers we have yet to meet and far away beyond the horizon of their knowing. Something stirred in the dark between stars, something ancient and human, something built to fight, not for conquest, but for protection. A machine of steel, and will its crew of flesh and heart listening to cries. No one else would answer in silence. The engines of the UES Retribution came alive, and a voice on its bridge spoke. With quiet resolve, set course for Kepler system, prepare the jump. They thought no help was coming, but they were wrong. Captain Jake Murphy was in his quarters aboard the deep patrol cruiser US Retribution when the emergency signal struck their receivers like a blow to the chest. His first officer, Lisa Rodriguez, called over the ship channel, her voice tight with, "Urgency, Captain, to the bridge. Priority distress call. You need to hear this." Murphy was already moving. 15 years of command had taught him that tone meant lives hung in the balance. The bridge was dim and functional, panels glowing in blue and green. The ship itself was forged not for comfort but for war. A steel predator designed to hunt real fleets, yet filled with people who had not forgotten why humanity built ships like this. Rodriguez met his eyes and played the recording. The alien voice trembled, but the meaning was clear. 20,000 civilians are under attack by Korak raiders. Please someone help us." Murphy listened in silence, jaw tightening as the words cut through him. Families, children, an entire colony about to be erased. And no one else answering. Navigator Pete Collins, young sharp with numbers, glanced at his display. 3.2 light years away. "Captain, at normal speed, we arrive in 4 days. Murphy swore under his breath. 4 days, those people would not survive 4 hours. Chief Engineer Amy Watson spoke from her console. Hair tied back, grease on her hands. "We have the experimental jump drive, Captain. It might cut travel to 18 hours. Murphy turned slowly. He knew the risks the drive was. Untested, unstable. It could rip the ship apart between dimensions. Rodriguez reminded him of that fact. "Amy, you said yourself it is not ready. It could kill us all." Watson's eyes burned with defiance and compassion. "Maybe, but if we do nothing, 20,000 lives end for certain." Murphy felt the weight of the choice pressing against his chest. Combat Specialist Tony Clark leaned forward. Scars on his hands, weapons database pulled up. Korak raiding fleet will be 1 heavy cruiser, 3 destroyers. 12 frigates, tough but pirates, not disciplined militaries, Captain. If we get there, we can take them. Murphy studied his crew, each face lit with determination. Dr. Kate Morgan. Their medical officer spoke softly. "If we reach them, there will be wounded. There will be children gasping for breath in thin tunnels. We cannot be too late." Murphy nodded. "You are right. The time to decide is no." We looked to Collins. "What are the odds of survival with the experimental drive? 60% chance. Of arriving fully intact, 30% damaged, 10% gone forever. Not great odds, but better than the odds of the Zalani, if no one came." Murphy stood tall on the bridge, his voice carrying across every station. "We are going to try. Amy, prepare. The drive Pete plot emergency. Jumps Tony arm, all weapons Ben monitor their signal. Kate, ready your medical bay. He looked each of them in the eye. I will not lie to you, this could kill us, but if we succeed, we save thousands of lives, and if we fail, at least we fail trying to do what is right, not what is safe. First Officer Rodriguez stepped close by regulation. She said, "The outer rim is not our patrol zone. We have no official orders." Murphy gave her a faint smile. Sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following orders. Lisa, those people called for help, and we are the only ones who answered. That makes it our duty. That is why humanity built ships like this, not for glory, not for profit, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The crew moved with urgency, Amy vanishing into engineering, coaxing the unstable drive into readiness. Collins setting coordinates for multiple micro-jumps, Clark whispering to the guns of the Retribution as if to old friends, Ben Taylor at communications, listening to the weakening beacon, his quiet voice finally breaking. "Captain, the signal is fading. Their power is nearly gone. They do not have much time." Murphy closed his eyes, imagining tunnels filled with gasping colonists, children, clutching at the last threads of breath. Every moment they delayed meant another life slipping away. All stations report. Watson Drive is online. Collins' course is ready. Clark weapons hot. Morgan medbay. Prepped. Rodriguez steady at his side. Murphy inhaled deep and let the silence settle over them. This was the moment when courage meant everything. This was when humanity proved who they were. Initiate jump. He ordered the stars outside, bent and blurred space, itself twisted around them as the experimental engine roared alive, dragging the Retribution through folds of reality unseen by any other species. The ship shuddered and screamed as if torn apart, but it held together, the crew holding their breath through the impossible storm of light and darkness and then silence. They were gone into the void, streaking toward a doomed world that still believed no help would come down in engineering. Watson clutched the console, sweat dripping from her brow system, straining, but holding. "Together I can keep it running," she growled, "though it may cost us a few parts of the hull." Murphy's voice answered, steady. "Do whatever it takes. We cannot be late." Collins monitored trajectory, his fingers flying, correcting course, adjusting for distortions. His voice calm even as alarms flickered around him. Tony Clark checked weapons over and over, whispering, "Not yet, not yet, but soon." Time stretched every hour, feeling like eternity. 18 hours to cross a gulf that should have taken days. 18 hours to decide if humanity still deserved its reputation as the species that never abandoned the helpless. Murphy stood at the center of it all, eyes fixed on the star map, imagining 20,000 lives waiting in suffocating dark. And he made a silent promise, "Hold on, we are coming." And so the Retribution tore through space, bleeding speed and fire, a solitary answer to a desperate prayer. The crew did not speak of fear, though each one carried it in silence. They only spoke of purpose. They would not arrive too late. They could not, because that was not what humans did not. Now, not ever. The Retribution burst from the folds of distorted space, like a shadow tearing through glass. The stars snapped back into place, and the ship drifted silent at the edge of the Kepler system, its stealth systems cloaking it from the eyes of the enemy. Captain Murphy stood at the forward display, his knuckles white against the railing as he looked at the tactical screen. "My God," whispered Lisa Rodriguez beside him. The display filled with the Korak fleet like wolves circling a broken prey. One heavy, cruiser 4 destroyers and 15 smaller raiders holding low orbit over the planet below them. Fires scarred the surface. The Crystal City burned until its towers were nothing but glowing embers. Debris from destroyed defense platforms drifted across space like shattered bones. Ben Taylor at communications spoke quietly. "I am picking up faint signals from underground. The colonists are still alive, but their power is almost gone. Maybe 2 hours left of life support." Murphy's jaw clenched. 2 hours to save 20,000 lives. It had to be enough. Tony Clark scanned the fleet, his fingers itching over the weapons console. Captain, they are waiting for ground troops to finish the job. They have no idea we are here. Murphy's eyes narrowed. Then we will use that ignorance against them. On the Bloody Fang War, Captain Sethak lounged in his command seat, pleased with the ruin unfolding below. The Zalani had offered no resistance. Their defenses were ash. Their spirits broken soon his ships would be laden with slaves and plunder. The galaxy would see again what happened to those who defied Korak power. His censor officer called out uncertainly, "Captain, unusual readings at the edge of the system. Perhaps debris from orbital wreckage." Sethak barely glanced at it. "Ignore it and focus on the tunnels. I want the last of them flushed out." Soon he had no idea death was already waiting for him beyond the black on the Retribution. Murphy gathered his officers around the tactical table. The holographic map of the system floated above the surface. Amy Watson had worked miracles. The stealth field was perfect. The Korak could not see them. Murphy pointed at the massive silhouette of the Bloody Fang. "Here is the plan. We strike there. Command ship first. Without Sethak barking orders, the rest of their fleet will break Tony precision strikes on engines and weapons, disable them if possible, destroy if necessary." "Understood," Captain Clark replied with grim satisfaction. Murphy turned to Lieutenant Alex Turner, leader of the Marine Detachment. "What about their ground forces?" Turner was calm, eyes steady. "We drop directly into their positions. Non-lethal measures, stun grenades, sonic disruptors, sleep gas. The Korak will fall unconscious. Civilians will not be harmed." Murphy nodded. "Good humans did not kill unless there was no other way. That was what set them apart," Rodriguez asked. "And if they refuse surrender?" Murphy's smile was cold as vacuum. "Then they learn why humans build ships." Like this, he looked around the table. "You all know the stakes. Failure means death for thousands. Success means hope for more than just this colony, because word will spread across the rim if humanity still answers calls for help." Tony Clark's voice, cut and steady and fierce. "Captain, this is what we train for." Murphy placed both hands on the table, then let his gaze sweep across every face. "All right, positions, people. Weapons. Hot Marines prepare to drop medical bay on standby. Amy, keep us cloaked. Until the first strike, Ben, get ready to jam their comms and then broadcast our message to every channel in this system." Rodriguez nodded. "What message?" Murphy straightened Korak vessels. "This is Captain Jake Murphy of the United Earth ship Retribution. You have 60 seconds to leave or face destruction." The order was given, and the bridge fell into a tense silence. The stars beyond seemed to hold their breath down on the planet. The colonists huddled in the crystal caves, dust raining on their heads. As sonic weapons cracked, the stone children clung to parents, breath shallow as air thinned. Elder Nixara whispered stories to keep fear at bay while Administrator Thexani sat with his head in his hands, knowing the end was minutes away and far. Above the humans waited cloaked a thunderstorm. Hidden behind a veil, Sethak on the Bloody Fang received the transmission. His scales flushed dark with fury. A human ship, one ship against an entire fleet. His laughter echoed across the bridge, send. "Them." "My reply," he growled, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are outnumbered. Withdraw or be taken as slaves." Murphy listened in silence, checked his chronometer. 50 seconds left, he said flatly. "Sethak, use them wisely." The Korak captain snarled, rage boiling through his veins. "All ships find that human destroy them." Now sensors swept across the void, but found nothing. The Retribution remained unseen. "Patient waiting time's up." Murphy said, his voice like steel. "Tony, fire." The first shot. The railgun of the Retribution thundered in silence. A tungsten slug accelerated to 10%. The speed of light ripped across the gulf of space and tore into the Bloody Fang's engines like the wrath of gods. The flagship shuddered, alarms screamed. Across its decks, Sethak was hurled from his chair, smoke filling the bridge damage report. Engines crippled, weapons failing. How did they do this before his crew could answer another shot? Followed plasma lances igniting armor until it ran like molten, fire tearing through one of the destroyers like paper. There, Captain shouted a Karak officer. I see them starboard 3,000 kilometers, but by the time weapons locked, the retribution was gone, moving faster than their eyes could follow. Tony. Clark's hands danced across his console, railguns sang again, plasma cannons flared, missiles died in point defense nets. The Karak fired wildly blind their shots burning empty space, while the human ship wove like lightning. Murphy watched calmly, each impact disabling another enemy vessel, each crippled raider. Drifting helpless, the technological gap was absolute human warcraft, had been built for wars that shook empires. The Karak had never faced anything like it. Murphy's voice rang steady. Disable what you can destroy, what you must. No ship carrying slaves leaves this system alive, and with every order carried out, the balance of the battle shifted the helpless below in their tunnels, still believing death was certain, had no idea. Salvation had already arrived, roaring from the void, unseen, unstoppable. The retribution struck like a thunderbolt, railguns flinging death plasma cannons, searing armor missiles, swatted from the void by point defense. The Karak fleet reeled, stunned by the impossible. The bloody fang drifted crippled engines aflame, its command crew screaming as atmosphere vented through ruptured decks. One destroyer broke in half another, fled blind and burning. But the human ship did not pause. It moved like a predator, each strike deliberate, each motion, precise, built for wars. The Karak could not even imagine on the bridge. Murphy stood unshaken, eyes locked on the tactical display report. Tony Clark's voice carried hard and steady, heavy cruiser. Crippled one destroyer destroyed, 2 frigates fleeing, others trying to regroup. Murphy nodded. Let them regroup. The more they cluster, the easier they are to break. Amy Watson called from engineering stealth field, holding shields at 90% weapons stable. We can keep this up all day. Captain Ben Taylor announced comms. Our jammed Karak ships cannot coordinate their chatter. Is chaos. Murphy gave the order, push them harder. Below on the planet, crystal towers burned like candles in a hurricane. Karak soldiers roared through the streets, chains in their hands. Plasma. Rifles spitting fire. Their laughter was cruel, their power absolute, until the sky screamed with thunder. Drop pods streaked down like meteors, slamming into plazas and avenues with a fury that shook the ground. Hatches exploded open, and human Marines poured out armored figures with weapons that howled in the night. Alex Turner led them. His voice calm but fierce move. Outstun grenades first secure the civilians. The Karak warriors turned in shock. They had faced miners with shovels and farmers. With tools, now they faced soldiers born for war. Grenades burst in blinding light and sound. Karak fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Sonic rifles spat pulses that hurled them to the ground. Unconscious, sleep gas rolled through alleys. Warriors collapsed into dreams. Turner's squad moved like water-clearing streets with brutal efficiency, not killing, not slaughtering, but disabling one by one until the laughter of the Karak turned to silence. Zelani eyes watched wide with disbelief from shattered doorways. They had expected chains and death. Instead, they saw humans in blue armor waving them back to safety. Their voices muffled, but their gestures clear. Stay down. You are safe now. Marines covered tunnels and herded families toward. Secure zones, no one harmed, no one left behind up above the Karak war. Captain Sethak roared in rage as his fleet fell apart. Sensor screens blazed with damage reports. Railgun strikes tore holes where armor had been. Plasma beams carved ships open, like fruit. He slammed his clawed hand on the console. Find them! Find that cursed human ship, destroy them. His officers scrambled to obey, but their scanners found only ghosts. The retribution struck and vanished again and again, and every strike was. Lethaltny Clark worked his console like a pianist. Each key a note of destruction. Enemy frigate disabled another destroyer, losing air. their formation breaking. Captain Murphy gave the order, jam their surrender channels. We do not let them beg their way out, not until they drop every slave pod and abandon their loot. He paused, his voice like ice, and if they do not comply, burn them down in the tunnels. Texani felt the earth shake, explosions echoing through the caverns, dust raining on terrified colonists. The end. He thought this must be the end, but then the doors burst open, and figures in armor strode inside. Not Korak, not scaled monsters, but strangers of flesh and steel. Human medics rushed forward, oxygen tanks, medical kits, voices calm. Though no words could be understood, they placed masks on children. Lungs filled with life again. Hands steadied the elderly. The colonists gasped, not in fear, but in awe. Elder Nixara lifted her eyes, tears glowing against the crystal light, and whispered, "Perhaps the heroes have come, above the battlefield." Murphy stood tall, every report flooding in Marines, securing ground forces. Colonists rescued weapons, silencing raiders, the Korak fleet breaking apart like glass underhammer. He opened a broad channel, his voice carrying across every corner of the system. "This is Captain Jake Murphy of the United Earth Ship Retribution. Korak vessels, you are defeated. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Release your captives, abandon stolen goods, withdraw now for..." The first time fear entered Korak voices, Sethak snarled, but his fleet was broken. His warriors scattered his pride, bleeding into panic. The humans had undone in minutes what the Korak had built in decades of terror. On the planet, Alex Turner lifted, his visor meeting the eyes of a Zalani child who had asked only hours before, "Where are our heroes now?" He reached out a gloved hand, and the child took it. Trembling hope blooming in that fragile grip. Turner whispered softly, though the child could not understand, "You are safe now, little one." The Retribution's guns cooled, smoke fading in space, but their presence burned brighter than any star across the rim. A single message carved into the void. Humanity had heard the cry of the helpless, and humanity had answered with steel and fire. The smoke of battle still clung to the air over New Haven streets. Broken crystal towers lay in jagged ruin. The scent of scorched stone and ash filled every breath. Yet through that ruin moved figures the colonists had never seen before. Tall, armored. Humans with visors, lifted faces marked not by cruelty but by resolve and compassion. Dr. Kate Morgan knelt beside an elder Zalani whose chest heaved weakly. She placed a mask over his face. Oxygen flowing into failing lungs. His color brightened. His breathing eased, though he did not know her words. He understood her tone, gentle, steady, alive around her. Other medics moved swiftly. Children given air tanks. Elders carried on stretchers. Human hands firm but careful. The Zalani watched wide-eyed, still trembling with disbelief. Only hours ago they had waited for chains and plasma fire. Now strangers moved among them like guardians from a story they did not know. Administrator Texani stood in the entrance of a tunnel, his limbs shaking as he stared across the plaza. Humans working with a discipline and speed. His people had never known engineers carried portable fusion units restoring lights that had been dead for days. Machines hummed, power flooding into broken grids. The city flickered, awake, as if life itself had returned. Vexlar, the chief engineer, whispered in awe. "They repaired more in hours than we could in weeks." Texani only nodded, his voice lost within his chest. Elder Nixara moved with staff in hand, her ancient eyes sharp. With wonder, she watched soldiers secure perimeters without cruelty. She watched doctors ease pain without hesitation. She stepped forward slowly, and a young human turned translation device, blinking at his belt. Chris Johnson. The technician adjusted. It quickly, voices crackled, then words emerged soft and halting. Elder Nixara spoke. "I am keeper of the old ways. Who are you humans?" she asked. "What do you want?" Captain Murphy walked forward, helmet in hand. His face lined with fatigue but steady, bowed his head with respect. "We are from Earth," he said through the translator. "We came because you called for help. We came because it was right." Nixara studied him, long silence, stretching before she asked, "You risked your lives, your ship against a fleet for strangers. Why would you do this?" Murphy met her gaze because evil triumphs when good people do nothing. We heard your voices, we had power to answer. That made it our responsibility. Her eyes glistened as she turned to her people. "See them," she said quietly. "These are the heroes we told stories of. These are the voices who answer when no one else dares." Trade Captain Luxori listened nearby. His world overturned. He had spent his life bargaining with governments who measured lives in currency, corporations who sold safety only for profit. Yet these humans had asked for nothing. No concessions, no payment, no trade, and they had broken a fleet in 17 minutes. Luxori whispered to himself, impossible yet true, above in orbit the detention. Cells of the Retribution held Korak prisoners. Their scales dulled, their arrogance drained. War Captain Sethak sat silent, shackles on his wrists, his eyes burning with questions. Intelligence Officer Nick Adams faced him, calm, steady. The Korak growled, "You could have killed us. You should have killed us yet. You feed us, give us air. Why mercy for enemies who would show you none?" Adams leaned back his reply. "Simple, because we are not you." Sethak hissed confusion in every tone in his world. Strength meant cruelty. Victory meant slaughter. Mercy was weakness. Yet here he sat alive, facing not execution but trial. He could not understand. But in that lack of understanding was fear back on the planet. The Zalani emerged from tunnels in waves 20,000 souls blinking in the light that returned slowly to their broken city. They carried children weak, but breathing. They carried elders alive, though fragile at every corner. They saw humans working, patching power lines, sealing cracks, distributing. Food brought from their ship, no orders, no demands, only work, only help. Administrator Thexani stood before his people, voice trembling. These humans came when no one else would remember this. Remember that when we were dying, the ones who answered were not our own governments, not the powers who claim order, but strangers from beyond the stars. Elder Nixara lifted her staff high, her voice carrying across the plaza. "They did not come for wealth. They did not come for land. They came for us because it was right." Murmurs spread through the Zalani ranks, awe mixing with gratitude. Young Zaxali, the one who had given her breath to strengthen the beacon, lay on a stretcher oxygen mask against her face. Her chest rising shallow but alive, she opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was a human medic smiling at her relief, flooding through his features. She had believed she would die unheard, but her voice had carried far enough, and humanity had answered. Murphy stood at the edge of the plaza, his crew around him. Lisa Rodriguez scanning star maps. Tony Clark watching the sky for any returning threat. Amy Watson already promising new defenses. Thexani approached slowly, his limbs still trembling. "You saved us. You ask nothing why." Murphy's answer was quiet but firm, because no one deserves to die alone in the dark. The words spread across the square, whispered from Zalani to Zalani. A phrase carried on breath, like a vow. No one deserves to die alone in the dark, and in that vow, a seed was planted, one that would echo across the rim for generations. For when other colonies faced despair, they would remember that once humanity had come roaring out of the void to stand against darkness. The crystal city of New Haven breathed again. Lights flickered back to life. Air flowed strong through the tunnels, the smell of clean oxygen mixing with the scent of scorched stone. The Korak were gone, their ships drifting as wreckage or fleeing into the void, leaving behind chains broken and weapons silent. The Zalani stood in the ruins, dazed but alive, and around them the humans worked as if they had always belonged. Amy Watson knelt with a group of Zalani engineers, her hands dark with grease as she sketched systems into the dust lines of circuits and power conduits. She spoke slowly through the translator. "This is how you stabilize a grid. This is how you build redundancy, so power never fails again." Vexlar leaned close, absorbing. every detail his compound eyes shining with awe. "We could not have imagined such designs." Amy smiled. "You can now?" Tony Clark stood in the plaza surrounded by young Zalani teaching them how to lay defenses without heavy weapons. "You do not need warships," he explained. "You need warning systems, traps, deterrents. The Korek thrive on fear. Deny them easy prey, and they scatter." His voice carried iron, but his gaze softened whenever he looked at the children who watched him as if he were carved from legend doctor. Kate Morgan moved through the medical tents. She showed Zalani healers how to use simple techniques. First aid emergency care methods to treat burns to restart a stopped breath. Her words soft, her hands sure. One young healer asked through the translator, "Why do you teach us when you could keep this knowledge for your own kind?" Kate paused and answered, "Because life should never be a secret in orbit. The Retribution held the broken remains of Korak warships, the captured prisoners silent behind their barriers." Nick Adams continued his quiet interrogations, not with cruelty, but with patience. He explained their crimes would be judged by galactic law, that their victims would testify that there would be fairness, not vengeance. The Korak could not understand, yet fear and confusion gnawed at them. Sathak stared at the human officer with eyes like burning coals. "You fight like demons, but treat us like guests." Why Adams only shook his head because humanity does not become its enemy, Elder Nixara walked the city with Captain Murphy beside her, her staff tapping softly against the stone. Her voice carried, so the youngest could hear, "Long have I told stories of light in the darkness today. I have seen that light with my own eyes." She looked at Murphy and said softly, "You came when no one else did. You gave us more than our lives, you gave us hope." Murphy bowed his head. "Hope is why we fight, Elder, because without it, nothing else matters. Ward of the battle did not stay in New Haven long." Before whispers spread across the rim, traders carried the tale. Smugglers repeated it. Stations repeated it to passing ships. A colony doomed a fleet of raiders broken by one human warship 17 minutes from first shot to final surrender. It sounded like myth. Yet the details were too precise to be dismissed. Every captain, every merchant, every frightened colony listened and wondered. Could it be true? Had humanity returned to the rim, not as conquerors, not as profiteers, but as protectors? The hegemony patrol ship Steadfast Commander Vale heard the report from his subordinates, disbelief giving way to unease. He had ignored the distress call, left New Haven to die, but humans had come instead, and now every channel sang their victory. When Murphy's transmission reached him, Vale spoke stiffly over comms. "Captain Murphy, this is Commander Vale of the Steadfast. I owe you apology. I underestimated both your people and mine." Murphy's reply was calm. "No apology necessary, Commander. But if you value order in the rim, protect this system, so my crew will not have to return." Vale paused, then nodded, though unseen by Murphy. "Understood. We will patrol this world in the marketplace of the rim." Whispers turned to stories. Stories turned to warnings. Korak captains who once swaggered into taverns now spoke in hushed voices about a human ship that had cut apart their fleet raiders, who once threatened small colonies, now hesitated at beacons, remembering the tale of the Retribution back. On Kepler 442b, the Zalani city began to breathe, not only with repaired power, but with new spirit children played again in the plazas. Though among ruins, their laughter mingled with the hum of fusion generators. Life stirring again. Zach Seeley, the young one who had sacrificed her breath for the beacon, lay in recovery. Oxygen mask hissing softly when she woke. She looked around and saw humans repairing walls, Zelani building alongside them. She smiled weakly, her voice faint but steady. It was worth it. Elder Nixara held her hand and whispered, "Yes, child. It was worth it because they heard you." Murphy stood with his crew watching the horizon's silver trees catching the new dawn. Rodriguez spoke quietly. "Captain, the galaxy will not forget." This Murphy's eyes were distant. "Maybe they should not forget Lisa." Maybe it is time they remember that when darkness rises, there will always be someone who answers in the silence of space. The retribution hung above the world, its hull scarred, its crew weary, but its mission fulfilled, and across the rim hearts stirred with a strange new feeling, fear in the predators, hope in the hunted. A single truth whispered like fire from star to star. Humans had returned, and they had not come for conquest. They had come to stand between the innocent and the void. The story of New Haven did not remain in the tunnels of crystal or the memory of survivors. It traveled, carried on trader channels, whispered in the markets of fringe stations, retold in smoky bars where smugglers drank and pirates planned. It grew. With every retelling, a colony abandoned by governments, a fleet of raiders descending like wolves, and one human ship answering the call, breaking the predators in minutes and asking nothing in return. In the halls of the hegemony Senate, the news arrived like wildfire. Senators argued, shouting over each other, some furious that humanity had acted without orders. Others quietly relieved that someone had done what they themselves had not. Commander Vale of the Steadfast delivered his report, voice heavy with shame, admitting he had refused the distress call and watched as humans succeeded where he had failed. One senator demanded sanctions, another demanded alliance, but behind the noise was fear, because if humans could do this once, they could do it again, and no one knew what they wanted in the dark corners of the rim. Pirate lords gathered scales, glittering feathers, ruffled mandibles clicking as they argued what to do about the retribution. Some said it was myth, a tale grown. Too large, others showed fragments of intercepted transmissions, undeniable proof. The Karak captain Sethak himself, captured alive by humans and soon to face trial. Pirates who had laughed at small colonies now shifted uneasily. Their easy prey was no longer easy, because now every desperate colony might carry hope that somewhere in the dark a human ship was listening back on Kepler 442b. The Zalani city stirred with life, its people emerging from fear into determination. They rebuilt. Their towers not as they were before, but stronger, reinforced with lessons humans had given them, energy grids, stable communication arrays, reaching further warning systems ready for the next storm. Elder Nixara gathered the people in the plaza, her staff raised high, her voice clear. We were saved, not because we were rich, not because we were powerful, but because someone heard our cry and chose to answer. We must honor that gift by becoming what they were for us, hope to others, administrator. Thexani stood beside her, his voice quieter but firm. When the day comes that another voice cries in the dark, we will remember this day and we will answer as they did. We cannot fight as they fight, but we can give aid, we can give shelter, we can remind others they are not alone. Young Zaxalai listened from her stretcher, her lungs still weak but her spirit burning. She whispered, I will carry that promise. I will not let their example fade. Aboard the Retribution, Captain Murphy listened to the reports of his crew, Amy Watson describing the defensive systems she had left behind, Tony Clark quietly detailing how no Korak ship had escaped with slaves, Rodriguez reminding him that word was already spreading far beyond their sensors, Ben Taylor monitoring chatter from rim stations. Murphy sat in silence, absorbing it all at last. He spoke softly. The galaxy will wonder why we came. The galaxy will ask what we want. But the answer is simple. We want them to know they are not alone. Nick Adams visited the brig where Sethak sat bound. The Karak captain's arrogance drained his eyes hollow. Yet burning, he rasped, human. You destroyed my fleet. You showed mercy where none was owed. Why Adams leaned forward, because cruelty is easy, but kindness changes everything, Sethak hissed. You think mercy will make you strong, but it will make you weak. Adams only shook his head. It already made us strong enough to break you in the medical bay. Kate Morgan checked on the wounded Zalani, her hands gentle, her smile tired. One child clutched her sleeve. Compound eyes wide, she asked through the translator, will you leave us? Kate nodded. Yes, child, we must. But she added softly, though you may not see us, we are never gone. If you call, we will hear you. The child closed her eyes, comforted by a promise she could not fully understand, but felt in her heart. Murphy stood at the viewport watching the scarred world below, silver trees glimmering in dawn light. Rising above the ruins, Lisa Rodriguez joined him quietly. What now, Captain? He took a long breath. Now we keep moving, Lisa. Now we listen for the next call, because there will always be another colony. Always another cry. And if no one else answers, we will. He looked at her, eyes steady. This is who we are, and across the stars that truth spread. Governments uneasy, pirates, fearful colonies, whispering prayers with new hope. The words carried on comms and memories. A phrase repeated again and again. No one deserves to die alone in the dark, and every time it was spoken, it was as if the light of New Haven spread a little further. The Retribution prepared to depart, engines, humming marines, stowing gear, medics, packing supplies, engineers sealing wounds on the ship itself, scarred from battle, but still proud. The crew tired, yet standing ready, their mission unfinished, because humanity's mission would never be finished, as long as darkness waited beyond the stars. Murphy spoke into the ship's comms crew of the Retribution. You have done what others would not. You saved lives, you gave hope. Remember this day, not for the fight we won, but for the voices we heard and answered. This is why we are here. And so the ship turned silently away from Kepler 442b, leaving behind not emptiness, but a promise, a colony alive, and a legend beginning to grow. The sky over Kepler 442b shimmered with the glow of dawn's silver light, touching the broken spires of New Haven, as if to bless the ruins with hope. The Zalani gathered in the great plaza, 20,000 souls standing shoulder to shoulder, their bioluminescent organs glowing softly like a sea of stars reflected in stone at the center. Elder Nixara raised her staff, her ancient voice carrying across the silence. Today, she said, we stand because strangers chose to fight for us today. We breathe because they would not let us die today. We know the truth of the stories we once thought were only myths. Heroes do exist, and they came not with chains, not with demands, but with open hands and hearts. Captain Murphy stood at the edge of the crowd. His crew beside him, Amy Watson, her hands still marked with grease. Tony Clark silent but watchful. Kate Morgan with tired eyes that still held warmth. Lisa Rodriguez steady and loyal, every one of them worn but unbroken. Thexani approached, slowly, his voice trembling with emotion. You saved us. You asked nothing, yet you gave everything. Murphy bowed his head quietly. No one should die alone in the dark, that is all. Thexani's eyes glistened, he whispered. Then, we will never forget Luxori. The trader lifted his voice for all to hear. He had lived his life among contracts and bargains, seeing profit in every handshake. Yet here he saw something else. He looked at the humans and declared to his people, let it be known that they did not come for gain. They came for us, and because of them, we are alive. His words echoed across the plaza, taken up by thousands. Alive. Alive, alive, the word became a chant, rising like thunder. Zaxeli weak, but alive stood supported by friends. Her voice small, but fierce. I gave my breath to send the beacon. I thought it would vanish into the void, but it reached them and they came. Never forget that when hope feels gone, someone may still be listening. Her words lit fire in the hearts of the young who saw her as a symbol of courage. In orbit, the Retribution prepared to depart, its hull scarred from battle. Its systems strained but still proud. It carried Korak prisoners who would face justice. It carried scars that told stories, and it carried a crew, ready for whatever came next. Nick Adams checked the brig one last time. Sethak sat silent. His pride shattered his voice, low human. He muttered, you do not fight like others, you do not kill as we kill, you are something else. Adams answered evenly, We are what you fear most, a people who choose mercy and still cannot be defeated on the surface. Elder Nixara lifted her staff once more. We will remember this day, she vowed, and when others call for help, we will answer as they answered for us, her. People raised their hands, glowing lights spreading through the crowd, like constellations across night sky. They were more than survivors. They were witnesses. They were now keepers of a story that would travel fair. Aboard the ship, Murphy addressed his crew over the comms. You did more than fight, you gave hope where there was none today. The galaxy learned what it means when humans answer a cry. Remember that, because we will hear another and another. As long as there is darkness, there will be voices calling, and we will be there. The engines roared alive, the great ship lifting slowly into the heavens, the crowd below watching in silence, their lights shimmering, their voices united in song, a song of gratitude, a song of promise. The humans could not understand the words, but they felt the weight of it in their hearts as the retribution rose higher until it vanished into the sky, and then the legend began to travel, carried by traders, whispered by refugees, spoken even by pirates in fearful tones, one ship against many, one crew, against despair and victory. Not for conquest, but for strangers. No one could deny what had happened. No one could dismiss the power of the story. Colonies whispered it in their prayers, mothers told it to children in shelters. Raiders remembered it before daring to strike a world. Governments debated it in secret councils. The humans had returned, and with them something more dangerous than weapons. They had brought hope, and so the retribution vanished. Into the void, silent and unseen, but never forgotten, its shadow cast across the galaxy, not as terror, but as promise. A promise that somewhere in the dark, if a voice cried out, it would be heard. A promise that even at the edge of despair there was light, a promise that no one deserved to die alone in the dark. The galaxy would never be the same, because the story of New Haven was no longer only a story. It was a vow, and humanity had already kept it.